me down or attacking me, or and
You mean like a judgment, like a
they
like
sort
a
of
job,
well, a lot of it's personal, you know, like personal judgments people have about their own sin, guilt feelings, but the net result often is that the spirits who are quite malicious and malevolent and also quite devious and also in addiction with you, you feel very happy to have around you because that they all feel like they love you as per your own definition of love. And then the spirits who are actually in a good condition, you sort of feel like, oh, they don't love me because they're pointing out things about me that I don't either want to hear or I don't believe are true.
Or I'm ashamed
Or I'm
about.
ashamed of, you know.
Yeah.
And so you end up in this place where the good spirits appear bad to you,
Right.
and the bad spirits appear good to you. And so it becomes really difficult then, from a spirit perspective, to help people with truth on earth, you know. And this was one of the constant feelings that you have as a spirit. You sort of go, if I could only just be there face to face with them again for a bit, you know, it would be a good thing. And that's, you know, that's fundamentally why, one of the reasons why we've returned, you know, just because it's good to be face to face with people. But also that's one reason why we're doing this trip as well.
Definitely.
Because it's good to be face to face with people on a more regular basis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're trying to figure out between the two of us how we can do this each year.
Yeah.
So that, you know, people have the opportunity to just receive truth in a really kind and direct manner, ongoing, because it is tough. Truth is such a gift, and when you don't have people around you who are truthful, then you kind of on your own. You've got to be very sincere as well, because the sin fights for itself, and the sin tries to rationalise itself to you. Having other people around who are passionate about truth and who want to share it with you in a loving way is a.
But who are also firm about the issues, not, you know, not pandering about the issues, but firm about the issues.
Not minimising the issues.
Not minimising them.
That's one of the reasons why we want to do it.
Yeah.
We just have to figure out a way to do it in a way that's quite loving to ourselves as well. We tried to take in everyone and every location, but
and we missed a lot of locations as well.
We missed locations where we were invited. This time even. So next year, less locations definitely. And then hopefully you guys can travel a bit and come to wherever we are.
So we've also got to choose locations that are a bit easier to get to, or easier venues, you know, so they're not so hard to set up and things like that.
Would you consider doing the assistance groups, continuing with the assistance groups?
Yeah, one of the things we are considering next year actually is there was an assistance group in 2019 that we did about sin. That the sound is such a mess of that it's going to take years to tidy up the sound. And so we thought, well, the group's already prepared, and we could actually run one in Australia and one in Europe and one here or something like that. And you know, as a part of next year or the year after's trip, you know. And in fact, we are thinking maybe of running one assistance group with each trip, you know, as well.
So you were talking about doing this for maybe like 5-6 years, and I saw that there's like 5-6 assistance groups that you've already planned.
Yeah, that's right.
And to give time for us to work through that material, like one each year.
And it's also good material because it's about sin, which is where we feel everybody's sort of at as well. So, so I think, you know, we're thinking quite a lot about, because it's already prepared as well. We're thinking quite a lot. Again, it'd be good to video it, so we'd have to bring a video kit with us. But, so it's just a bit of organising in terms of what to do. But,
3 years on sin would be great, I reckon.
Yeah, that's right. By the third year, you'll find you get sort of used to talking about it and not so ashamed of it, and also more pragmatic about you know, what's going on and why. Less resistive generally as well. Yeah. So one of the things we are considering is, do we like have like a those 5-day or 6-day events like we had in Australia? Do we do that like one of the weeks of our travel? But in an overseas location.
Yeah.
At this stage, it's looking like Europe is a bit too pricey for us. England is a possibility because of all those community halls that are available.
Yeah.
Some of them are quite large,
Yeah.
and so you can fit a good solid 100 or 150 people in them. Here, it's more looking like they're going to be like sort of like hotel venues probably, because here there's not a lot of sort of community halls of that size,
Yeah.
So either here or Canada. The trouble is where we're interested in Canada is quite difficult to get to because we're interested in Nova Scotia. In terms of a long term, having some kind of learning centre there. But it is quite hard to get there because it's always a double flight to get there generally. There's not a lot of direct flights to Halifax.
It's a lovely location.
It's a lovely location, but it's not a lot of direct flights there. So in the end, we'll probably have a centre there. The other place we're interested in a centre in Northern America is here. Not in North Carolina so much as probably between the border of North Carolina and Tennessee, in that area, where at the floods, ironically now. That's sort of the area we're interested in the States, as well as somewhere, potentially also somewhere in Texas as well, potentially. But,
why those locations in particular? Is there just more presence of interest, or?
And a lot of reasons, there's not just one reason. We have, some of the reasons include, we like it being in lower socio-economic areas for lots of different reasons. We like them to be connected to farming communities if we can, for lots of different reasons. We need the land to be relatively inexpensive in comparison. If you get something in New York or something like that, obviously it's extreme prices, and obviously in America you've got ranging from extreme to very low prices, haven't you? And the same in Canada as well, and the same in a lot of countries except for Europe, really. Europe is pretty extreme everywhere, with the exception, well, even in Portugal it's pretty extreme. Some of our friends there were showing us 3-acre blocks that were 2 million euros, in the country. Yeah, so it's sort of like, wow, that's like, we're looking at 500 acres minimum sort of thing, and for most of the centres. 500 acres to 2,000 acres, and if you're looking at those kind of prices, it's impossible. In Canada, you can pick up like 500 to 2,000 acres for less than 800,000 Canadian or something like that, which is what is that for you guys here? It's about 500 US or something like that. In some places in US, you can pick up that amount of land for a similar price as well. So there's things to do with economy. We like to choose an area where the land is quite damaged, because you can illustrate how to repair it. So there's good things about that as well. We like to not have it near a major city, but close enough where people can get there, but not so close that that you get a lot of insincere people coming there, if that makes sense. So there's a lot of considerations we have when we're looking at a potential venue for a learning centre. Obviously, the most difficult thing we've had first is to get the one in Australia going, and that's taken us nearly 8 years to do, to get that going. And on the average, it's all about people. Like you need to get at least three solid people who have received God's love, who are progressing and continue to progress and understand progress, and who are also in a humble place, but also like it's their whole life type of thing. And you need at least 3 of those kind of people to get a centre up really happening. And because we obviously don't want to leave the location only to find that the people, abuse the teachings of God's truth in the location. So that's very important that we can trust the people to run it in a manner that's in harmony with the teachings we're presenting. And so that's the tricky thing, is finding the people first, and then once the people are found, then the location also depends a lot on a lot of factors, but a lot of times we're looking for locations that are quite damaged, environmentally damaged and things like that, so that we can illustrate a lot of principles about repairing. So, yeah, and also, you guys here are really sitting on a powder keg, aren't you? You can feel that, can you?
Yep.
Yeah, many of you can. The US is a real, it's really like, there's a lot of facade over some very strong rage. That's present in your country. And, obviously, in an environment like that, it's pretty hard to get a learning centre established as one of the first centres. So we sort of feel at this stage that the one in Canada will probably happen before the one in the US for lots of reasons. And then in Europe, we're basically only really looking at 1 or 2 locations there as well, probably Portugal.
I was looking at properties in Portugal, and looking at a goat farm that had 100 acres. I think it was about 500,000 euros or something. So
it's amazing how expensive land is in Europe.
I mean, that's cheap in comparison to English prices. I mean, you won't even get hardly an acre.
I know, you don't get a cottage in England for that.
Yeah.
But it blows me away though in England and in Europe how expensive everything has become. Everything, like food, and like just 1 week of food in Belgium, we paid 800 euros for food. Like, for us in Australia, that's like 1,500 Australian dollars now. Mary and I live on 1,500 Australian dollars a month in Australia.
We noticed the food is like half the price out there.
Yeah.
And much better generally than what's available in England.
Yeah.
It's very tough for a lot of people.
Must be tough.
It's very tough.
Doing it hard.
A lot of people must be doing it hard, And
Canada, do you have any other place you're looking at besides Halifax area? Or Nova Scotia?
At this stage, mostly Nova Scotia probably is our first. Maybe New Brunswick, but that's even harder to get to than Halifax is. So we want it sort of relatively easy to get there. Not doesn't have to be ultra easy, but when it's even more difficult, where you've got to fly somewhere and then and drive 1,000 kilometres to get there, then obviously that's a lot more difficult for people to come and visit. But so probably we're not looking at the West Coast at this stage in Canada, mostly the East Coast. And that's only like probably, well, Maine is the next state down in US obviously. So, we were looking at Maine for a while, but it's difficult in Maine as well in terms of, you've got so many rules and regulations here in the US that are really not conducive to running a centre as well. So we like collecting our own water, for example, in all of our centres. Usually we have a large water collection because we're responsible for our own drinking water and everything. In the US, it's actually illegal,
Crazy.
which is really strange given it's just rainwater. So it's just interesting how in the US the way your government is working is it wants you to be dependent on the government. And I know in certain areas they're quite lax about that.
Yeah, they
obviously.
just don't enforce it.
Much
The
more,
zoning.
much more lax than other areas, but it's just interesting. In Canada, it's more like Australia where it's very lax, so you can pretty much do a lot of the things we want to do could be easily done without. We want to do everything properly, but and also with government approvals. But you also want to do things like collect our own water and be responsible for the development of the land and the improvement of the land and things like that. And in some countries that's harder than in other countries. Yeah. You would.
Yeah, I wanted to ask if it's a viable idea for US to purchase the equipment you guys need, and you will stay with somebody, with whoever, and then you don't have to travel in with it, that we would have it, like if you tell us exactly the specific stuff you need for sound, for camera,
Yeah, well,
and we could all donate.
we already have all of the speakers, that's already been purchased.
But
so
to donate it and keep it here, so you
Yes.
don't have to travel with it
yeah,
across
no,
from
I understand
anywhere.
what you mean. It's sort of at the moment we're still a bit unsure about how we'll pass through the US on the way home. So for next year and the year after, we're still a bit unsure about what's the best thing to do there. Now, obviously, if we're going to have a setup in one country, for it to be beneficial to Mary and I when we're travelling, it needs to be in every country we're going to visit, because otherwise we're still going to bring our bags to one country if that one country doesn't have the facilities.
But from the
So-
States, it would be easy for whoever has a glass to ship it to the next state that you guys want to.
Within the States.
Within the States, yes.
Within the States,
Oh,
yes, but I
I'm
mean,
talking
so it will
about-
stay in the US.
Yeah, but you're not understanding the logistics,
Yeah.
Katarina, from our perspective. From our perspective, let's say we do a round the world trip and we don't have a setup in Canada, but we do have one in the States. We've still got to do a round the world with our equipment.
Mhm.
So we've still got to bring stuff into the States.
Because so it's still got to come in the States with us anyway, because
Because it's with
we
us.
have to take to Canada because they don't have this set up. So for it to really work, each country we
Each
regularly
country should have-
visit
Yeah, that's what I.
would have to have it. Now that is more of a problem
Yeah, okay.
than just setting it up in one country, obviously. So the ideal setup for us would be like a van that can fit 4 speakers, all of our sound equipment, plus all of our personal stuff, luggage and stuff. And then we could just go, we could do like a road trip sort of tour, you know what I mean? And we could go, right, and we just rock up for a few days and then drive to another place, rock up. And, you know, getting around in all of these countries is pretty easy. We're pretty comfortable driving left or right side of the road and all that stuff. So, you know, it's all pretty easy. But the problem then is what happens to that equipment when we're not there? It's like if we're only in a country for like a month out of 1 year, then that's a very uneconomical use of a van and a, you know, obviously in UK there's a person that we know who runs a business and they need a van, and so what we do there is and they've already bought speakers and everything, and all we need is to travel with our gear that's not here yet. But there's really 2 yellow bags that we've got that are full of technical equipment that can do sound. If we're going to do, obviously, if we're going to do assistant scripts or something, we probably want video as well. But with sound, we can just do this quite simple setup. And in the UK, what we do is we hire a vehicle off of her, and she hires a vehicle to replace it. So we basically are paying for her hiring a replacement vehicle, and that will let us because her vehicle is insured for UK and Europe. We can actually go UK and Europe with the one setup, and that becomes then quite economical to do. And then when we finish, the van goes back to her and she uses it for the rest of the time, and all of the gear that we've used goes back into storage where she has her storage area. And so she's running a business, and so and we pay her for some storage and pay her for the hire of a van. And basically, we'd rather do that and pay someone else for the hire of the van anyway. and then we can take that to Europe, Ireland, and the UK. That entire setup, so we can cover lots of countries with that one setup. Here, what we could do is we could have a similar setup where maybe have somebody who's got a business with a van that we could hire that for. It has to be someone reliable because we've got to be able to, you know, and as you know, when people get angry, they're not reliable. So that's an issue. So it needs to be someone reliable. The person that we're doing that with in the UK, she's had many visits to Australia with us. She knows us personally well. She's had a lot of truth in her life. She's acted upon it. She loves it. And so she's more reliable. And so we can do that. But for it to work in the US, it would have to be someone very reliable who's already received some of God's love, doesn't get angry about truth, doesn't get angry about having their addictions confronted, and that we can maybe hire the van for a month, up to 2 months period, and chuck all the gear in it, drive up into Canada, come back into the US, drive across, you know, state or whatever, and cross to the other side of the US even maybe. And then come back to a central place, drop it all off, and then fly out is the ideal. To do that, a lot depends upon the people. Unless there's a people who are reliable, and also from an economic perspective, unless the people can use the van the rest of the time so it's not wasted. Because otherwise you have something sitting around for 10 months of the year, which, as you know, is not good for the vehicle or for anything. So there needs to be some kind of arrangement like that for it to properly work. Other than that, we travel with our yellow cases. Paddy here, so Paddy, if you put your hand up, Paddy here has purchased these speakers for 4 speakers and the stands and everything. And so Paddy owns them, and so these now, every time we come to NC, North Carolina, we'll be able to use those and not have to hire any. Now, and that's really handy for us because it means we don't have to, there's a whole heap of hire costs that go along with every venue as well.
So on this trip that we're sort of trying to roll out that concept very gradually.
Slowly.
So with speakers and cables and our antennas, stands and stuff. It would be good to have video cameras in the country because then we just travel with our audio stuff but it just, as Jesus said, it depends on the reliability of the people in the countries. And being able to sort of do it, roll it, like if you can roll it out in the countries we're going to simultaneously. So that sort of happened on this trip where people in the UK got together to purchase speakers for us. And then here, that really helped.
And also in
with
San Diego.
So
Michael Bailey purchased 4 speakers over there as well. So we don't have to hire speakers in San Diego or LA or San Francisco or here.
I think logically probably the next step is, if we're going to do assistance groups, would be video cameras because we've already got the sound set up, sort of that we've set up for this trip that we could
So
use.
if we knew what cameras you guys needed, that is even easier to ship from here to there and send it to where you're going.
The problem isn't the equipment. The problem is who uses it when we're there.
Well, nobody. I mean, they would be dedicated for you guys, and we would.
No, you don't understand. We're speaking.
When we're here.
If there's 4 cameras, somebody needs to man them. Somebody needs to understand how they work. Somebody needs to offload all the video. Somebody needs to process that video. Somebody needs to edit that video. Someone needs to put the sound with the video. Somebody needs to do all of those things. And those are, being reliable with those things is the most difficult issue we face. It's always the most difficult issue we face at the moment wherever we go is the reliability of the people. That's the most difficult issue. And the lack of reliability of the people always comes down to this problem. This problem of what happens when you want to start fighting for your sin. That's where we always run into problems. So the more time we spend with people, obviously when we organise things with people, we spend more time with them. The more time with them, the more challenged they become. The more challenged they become, the angrier they get. The angrier they get, the less time we can spend with them. Does that make sense? And so you end up where people feel keen to do something, not understanding the personal things that are going to be required of them in terms of their growth. And then once they begin to understand that, usually they go through a period of rage, and that rage can last anywhere from, you know, a few years to 10 years or 15 years. Yeah. And so it just depends now on how reliable they are dealing with their rage as to how reliable they're going to be in terms of whether, you know, in terms of our personal reliance on them as people doing something for divine truth. And we've had people that have been, you know, in the past that have worked with us for anywhere near up to 10 years, and they've still been in a rage and left. You know, so now what we do is we're very circumspect about who we rely upon as a result. Yeah.
What about just hiring a professional production company to run it?
Well,
It's very costly.
it's
right?
very costly, right? Yeah. And not, our donations that we get at the moment wouldn't cover that. A lot of people don't realise, like for example, in this trip all the way through Europe, we didn't even cover our costs to get there, or accommodation or travel or anything. And if it wasn't for the donations of one person in Europe, we would have come away around 15,000 euros short. But because one person donated more than that, that covered the expenses. But in terms of just general donations, we don't generally get enough to cover even our own expenses generally. A lot of the cost of our trips is paid for by people in Australia who are trying to help you have an experience of, you know, growth, and I've had that experience and they appreciate that experience, so they're trying to help you. And so, yeah, so almost a third of this trip was paid for by people in Australia who are not really benefiting from the trip, are they? but they want you to have that benefit. So yes, in some countries we find there's, you know, there's enough to cover the expenses and also spend a little bit on some equipment or something like that. But also but in other countries we find that's not the case. Yeah. And then in some countries we've been to on this trip, the costs of a venue this size, for example, in Belgium, the venue was not much larger than this actually. Probably another few metres longer. That's all.
It was bigger.
Not much though.
Yeah, not much.
We only fit 56 people in it, 60 people comfortably. This would fit 48 people in it fairly comfortably at a squeeze. That venue was costing us €1,500 a day.
Wow.
To hire. That was the cheapest one we could find, and it took us 70. There was 70 venues. There were almost 100 venues we looked at. 70 of them we approached. Almost every one of them knocked us back because of who we are. And then there were a few venues left over, ranging from €11,000 a day to €1,500 a day.
Wow.
No, it's 3,000. Yeah, I can't.
I'm pretty sure it might have been
I'm pretty sure
€500
it's-
a day because we couldn't afford to do that.
Yeah, it might have been €500 a day.
Yeah, 1,500 total.
1,500 total euros. No, that's not true because it's 3,200 Australian, so it must have been more. It must have been 1,800 euros.
Yeah,
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Anyway, it was
Anyway, it's
expensive.
expensive. Yeah.
Have you found a tech-savvy person that would be similar to Kate in following the way? It'd be wonderful if a tech-savvy person got on this path.
Yeah, but
Yeah, I
Agreed.
know.
most of tech-savvy people are pretty arrogant,
I wish I was tech-savvy, I'm not.
and it's very unusual to find someone like Kate.
Yeah,
Like-
she was precious.
Yeah, and it was she, you know, besides her being our close friend, it was a deep shame to lose her
Yeah.
in regards to what she was doing as well, because she was actually, you know, we had almost half done our new website, and which looks really lovely, and it also had a search engine and everything we were working on. But, you know, finding someone who's that committed, who is generally earning like $150,000 a year, and then comes to us and earns next to nothing.
Yeah.
You know, when I say earns next to nothing, she was working by donation as well. We donated to her, but also other people donated to her. But she, like, Mary and I are of all the people who work with us, we're the least paid of everybody. We generally pay other people more than we pay ourselves. But even then, they're still living on very low, like very low income, and by donation mostly, a combination of donations coming from all over the world generally. To find somebody who's tech savvy and has the knowledge and who's humble and who's willing to do that is pretty tough. Yeah.
There's some changes coming, so maybe someone of that caliber would be deeply affected and then find a life-changing.
We're hopeful.
Hopeful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it
we'll
would
see.
be really lovely. And maybe the Celestials are zoning in on a few, who knows?
Well, you know, they have been for many years, but again, it gets down to the people actually, you know, free will. You know,
Yeah.
a celestial spirit is going to be like God, honouring the free will of the individual, and it's pretty unusual to find a person with those skills who also is using their will in a loving direction.
Something catastrophic in God's law of attraction would have to happen, and then maybe there'd be an entirely different perspective.
When you
Maybe.
say catastrophic, why would anybody want something catastrophic?
Well, what I'm referring to is I perceive big changes coming to the North American continent, and it may take a person who has those skills and is making $150,000 a year to hit a bottom and go, I think I've got this all wrong.
Well, it's unlikely it's going to be someone from the US,
Yeah.
to be frank. Many of you have a lot to learn yet about your sin, and also a lot to change about your attitude to it. Once that changes, then yes, things can change significantly after that for large groups of people. But it needs firstly a core group of people who are happy to work through their sin. Not sort of angry and upset and you know, worried and fearful about it, but actually happy to do it. And once you have a core group of people doing that, then of course that can change things quite significantly. This is one of the reasons why we're raising these subjects with you, because if you get people who realise they're in sin, but also now have a desire to become repentant for it, now there's developing humility that can be worked with in time, and that's something that, you know, there's something that's happened in Australia to a degree, not to a large degree by any means, but many of the people who've had a lot to do is particularly over the last 8 years, because we've been running events twice a week for 8 years, and very few of them, a lot of them have been recorded, but none of them have been output because there's nobody to output them. But in that time, a lot of people, or a few people we could say, have positively responded and become quite humble. People like, who are the directors of the God's Way in Australia, Phoebe, Eloisa, Corny, just people like that who become quite humble and able to take direction and not argue about everything, and those kind of people are beautiful to work with, and then you can start doing something that is really like progressive, and then you've had other people who have donated significant things to that cause, even though they themselves have not necessarily wanted to be involved in the day-to-day operation of all of that. So we've had things like in Australia, 1,000 acres of land donated, you know, which in Australia cost about $1.5 million. So So, and we've had a bulldozer, 22-ton bulldozer, 22-ton excavator, tractor, 100 horsepower tractor, trailer, and a number of other things donated, which helps the operation of God's Way in that location. So to set up God's Way, and we haven't even got a venue yet.
Wow.
So our next goal is to sell off some of the property to raise enough finances to get a venue. Of course, if we could raise the finances without setting up the property, then we'd do that. But it's not looking like that would be the case. So what we're thinking of doing is selling off 600 acres, one 600-acre property, and then using the proceeds for that to build our first sort of hall in Australia, which would be good enough to have 150 people meeting there regularly. So that means that whenever Mary and I go back to Australia, we could run regular like events, you know, twice a week probably, or thereabouts, or do week-long events as well, like, you know, where we do an assistance group or something at that location. So we're actually in the drawing up of those plans at the moment, but it's about raising the funds to do those things, which we don't have, of course. So, but before you even get that far, you need to get the people ready. And that's difficult when you're not getting regular face-to-face.
Truth.
Do you have an idea yet when you're going to travel around Australia? Is that going to be the beginning of next year, doing talks there?
Yeah, we're thinking probably
January, February maybe.
or February, March.
Yeah.
Well, what we're thinking is when we go back to Australia, we'll need a bit of rest and a bit of catch up with the guys, a bit of reset on God's Way in Australia. Then we'll probably February, we'd have to wait for the Christmas period to finish because that's where it's sort of bedlam in Australia. And then probably February we will do a bit of a road trip, Mary and I, with some gear from all down the East Coast. And then we're thinking in May probably, we're thinking we will start another 3-month tour overseas. Yeah. Which at this stage we're looking at like maybe like something like 4 or 5 weeks in Portugal, 2 or 3 weeks in England, then across to Canada, maybe 5 weeks there, and then 3 weeks here, and then home, something like that. Yeah. And when we come through here, when we come through from Canada, we're thinking one big event, and then we'd have a couple of weeks where we catch up with people after that, because that's what we're missing on this trip as well. We get to see all of you, and then next week we're off to another place, you know, and we don't get to, you know, you're talking for 6 to 8 hours a day. Our general workload on our days like this, when we've got our sound equipment, is talking to from 6 to 8 hours a day, and then we do another 2 hours of work when we get back with all the audio.
Wow.
Unloading all the audio and trying to get it uploaded, things like that. And then so our general thing is we get up at 7, we're here at 10, we finish around 4, 4:30, sometimes 5.
Sometimes
talking,
6.
sometimes 6,
this
6:30.
trip, yeah.
Go home, 2 hours of unload, plus having dinner at the same time generally, and then bed, and then Mary and I normally get to bed around 8:30, and then start the whole process again the next day, and we do that for 3 days straight. Then there's a setup day as well, and you can see in amongst that there's no time to go out with people or to see them personally or just get to know you even, you know, like really, you know, the only opportunity we have to get to know you is here right now type of thing. Now when it's a small group like this,
This
it's
is a lovely
easier.
cosy group,
Yeah,
actually. It's our smallest group.
But when there's 120 or something, it's pretty hard. Yeah. So yeah.
Is there a place on your website where we can track what your events are, even if they're in Australia? Because When I go to your website, I have a hard time finding
I'll
current
just
things.
put it up, hey?
Yeah. Yeah,
Is this blank from the side?
it is blank, yeah.
Like, I didn't know you were doing anything for 8 years or 10 years. I thought you guys were just taking time away and just,
No, we haven't been advertising anything we've been doing in Australia for a long time either, because we just haven't had the time, to be honest. We're doing so much that there's little time to talk about what we're doing, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
We're trying to change that a bit, but obviously that just requires more time, and then it takes time away from actually doing. And one of the things we have been doing is trying to get the God's Way organisation in Australia sorted, so that we have a template of what we can use elsewhere, and we can iron out the problems because the problems that the God's Way organisation is actually going to be. We're thinking of giving our house to the God's Way organisation for an office at the moment, and then Mary and I will have to find somewhere to live or build a place to live or something like that. So we're just in sort of an organisational phase of doing all of these things to get God's Way established, and that's taken a lot of effort on the part of Mary and I, because there's very few people who can help, who have even, when I say who can, what I mean is who have the development to help, the spiritual development to help. There's a lot of people who say they want to help, but as soon as you start giving them jobs and everything, they start getting resistive and they start getting about their sin. You know, they get all hung up in their sin, and then they get angry and bitter, and all sorts of things start happening then. So we've found we have had to do a lot which included even writing the constitution for the organisation itself.
wow.
And everything else.
So, events are going to be always on event.divinetruth.com. I do write a semi-regular update on what we're doing on mary.divinetruth.com, and most people who heard about this trip heard about it there. I announced it there.
Yeah, so that's the thing to check.
That's the place to
regularly,
check. And you can
subscribe.
subscribe and then...
Mary, is that your blog?
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, that's Mary's.
Which is really just sort of turned... Well, yeah, it's my blog. But because...
It's turned into a bit of a news feed, I suppose.
It has, I suppose, because
Well, that's why, yeah.
Jesus has been so busy and the website was getting upgraded, we sort of shifted from putting updates on the website until the upgrade was finished, and then Kate passed and so on. But mary.divinetruth.com I'll always make an announcement there if we're doing something new, and I try and keep people up to date with what we are doing with our time.
And we are putting our events now that are more formal events
Yeah.
on the event.divinetruth.com. So
Where there's bookings. And then we've been very involved in setting up God's Way organisation, and you can see on godsway.net a lot of
and you
what's
can
been
subscribe
happening.
again as a blog to godsway.net.
Yeah.
Which I'd suggest you do, because you'll get regular updates. They are more. We've spent a lot of time getting them more focused on doing regular updates. Because in the end, what Mary and I just want to do is travel and teach,
Yeah.
and that's it. And that's where that's going to be the most effective use of our time, is to travel and teach. And any technical work and any updates and any letting you know what's going on and all the other things, we're hoping at some point in the future, God's Way will handle all that.
Yeah.
And God's Way will let you know where we are and what's going on. And so we're just in the process of getting enough people together in God's Way in Australia for them to do some of that. So at the moment, Mary's doing a lot of that, and I'm doing a lot of tech, but that's not how we want to run it. We want me away from the tech, Mary away from the regular updates, and we focus on writing, teaching,
God's truth.
God's truth.
Yeah.
That's what we want to focus our time on. That's where our time is the most effective. The updating of everything else will depend upon cooperation between people, sharing, you sharing what you hear, but also eventually people in God's Way being skilled enough to handle some of these things that we are currently handling. So I can get out of the tech. We've got 20 servers we have to look after, so I do all that as well. We also have two overseas servers that we look after here in the US. and for sharing truth worldwide. And that's going to get more problematic when YouTube starts making a lot more. They're already starting to make a lot more rules. They're putting advertising. These things we don't agree with. And so it's getting more and more problematic to do it for free, which means that we've got to shift across to having our own service. And in Australia, it's just way too expensive to have our own service. Like, what I can get in the US for $250 a month Australian would cost me in Australia $3,000 a month minimum for the same thing, right? And we just haven't got the budget to do that. So in the end, we need to have these external servers that are run like in the States or in Canada that share divine truth. But the trouble is we can't stream from them because we can't replace YouTube with them, because when you stream, it's a heavy burden on servers. And so we've got to come up with other ways of sharing video. And in particular, Mary and I don't really feel video is very effective, to be honest, because you're very tempted to sort of watch it like you watch telly, and very tempted to skip over things, very tempted to sort of pick and choose. Whereas when we would prefer to write books, to be honest, and because because with a book you have to sit down, have some reflection time,
engagement,
quiet, peace.
You can pause.
You can pause and you can reflect, and you can take your time on it, and it's much more effective for learning truth when it's not face to face.
Much more potent.
It is. And so we want to sort of get away from video really, and more into books but it requires Mary and I doing that, which means that we've got to get all of the things that are taking up our time out of our domain and onto other people's domain. Now, that is a work in progress, that happening. So it's not as easy as you think, given the fact we're doing everything for free either. Because every service we pay we pay for. So it's really interesting when you pay for everything, but you do everything for free, because that basically means everything. Like, they're all trying to get money out of you all the time, and you're trying to do everything for free at the same time. So it makes it quite difficult. So our goal, though, is that Mary and I will offload everything aside from teaching and writing, and then other people would handle the other things. The one of the purposes of God's Way is for that to occur. So we have been working towards that, but as I said, getting the people in the right development is the hardest thing about that.
So Odyssey just went commercial free recently.
Is that a streaming platform?
Yeah, it's a video streaming platform.
A lot of the video streaming platforms, they say they're commercial free and they say a lot of things, but when you read all the fine print, which I've done with most of them, they all have bandwidth limitations. So let's just to give you an idea what it's like. Let's say we produce a video and 10,000 people decide they want to watch it next week. Right? Now our videos are generally about 5 to 10 gigabytes long, right? And that's if you add up 10,000 people at 10 gigabytes, you can see you've got hundreds of terabytes of data going out of the service. Now, when they start seeing hundreds of terabytes going out of the service, now they treat you as commercial. So what they do now is they take you off any of their free services, and they start billing you for the data going out. And sometimes the rates of the data going out are so high that if we just did one video, 10,000 people, we would have to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to provide that one service, just in 1 week.
Why not do sub HD quality?
Well, it doesn't still change the amount of bandwidth. It changes the total data, but it also doesn't change the bandwidth usage. So usually these services still shoot out the bandwidth, based upon so it's a multiplication of the data and the bandwidth being used as to how they charge their service. So it's still going to be $40,000 a month for the same thing, which our total donations are average around $13,000 a month, right, for Divine Truth worldwide. That's generally our total donation. Now it's changed a bit when we've done the trip, obviously, because we've got more people interested, but generally, now of those 13,000, about 5,000 is already used paying for services. So we left with 8,000, then we pay a few people who are workers, and then usually Mary and I are left with 3,000 out of that. So if we have to pay 40K a month just to produce one video and get it out, that's like that, we can't afford it. And also, it's not the best way for you to learn truth either. The best way for you to learn truth would be to download a book that you could read, right? That would be more effective. So one of the things we're going to be using our sound for is we just use our sound, put it through a book transcription, and then have somebody edit it all and produce a book out of it. So you can actually go.
When he says somebody, that would be.
Can't be well, we have to do the first edit, obviously, because we need to make sure that that's accurate, right? And
But
then
only we can do that.
yeah, and then it'll be handed to somebody else, hopefully, to do the finalisation and the production,
the formatting,
and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
But that is a far more effective way to distribute the truth. So when we do a presentation like this, the ideal would be not that a video is produced, but that an audio is produced, it's converted to a text file, text, and then we edit it so that it sort of joins together a bit better than it would if you were presenting it, and then that becomes a book about this event, and then you can just read the book about the event, and rather than having to watch a video about the event.
And I would also really like to make a book that compiles a lot of information, everything on humility. Let's bring that all together and put it into like sort of a cohesive sort of
Everything about repentance.
those kinds of things. So you get you sort of get a concentrated lesson, if you like, that you can put into a library.
So with our servers, if you download a video, you can download a video in a few seconds, as long as everybody else isn't downloading at the same time. But if 10,000 people try to download from we've only got 2 servers publicly facing at the same time, you're not going to get hardly anything from those servers anymore. Basically a server can only handle a certain amount of data, and then it's trying to handle data, trying to get data, trying to handle data, and it gets itself in such a bind that eventually it just crashes anyway. And these are big servers, these store like 100 terabytes of data on them, and we've got 1 gigabyte bandwidth to the net on them.
People probably don't know that they can even use those servers to download.
Yeah, there's one called US Pub 01.
Where are they located in the US?
Both of them, I think, are in Texas at the moment.
Okay.
But uspub01.divinetruth.com and uspub00.divinetruth.com. They both have the same information on them. So our entire website's on them, individual videos are on them, and you can browse it like you're browsing a disc at home. We've done a very simple thing where you just click on the next thing and it takes you down to the next tree and you can look through. And so where it says DT, that's Divine Truth. Where it says GW, that's God's Way, and so forth. There's, and you can just work your way through it. At the moment, we've put up all of our audio that I've actually processed at this point. Has been put up under, I think it's WW for Worldwide Trip, is what that's for. And then underneath that you'll see audio, audio high, audio low. The lowest audio is about 192 kilobit MP3s, I think. But one of them will fit on your phone, but if you try to put 20 on your phone and you haven't got a good storage, then it's going to take up a lot of space, right? But those two servers are a mirror of each other, and you can download anything that you can download from our website can be found there as well. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So everything that you could download is there, but it's not in a presentable state. It's more just like a file system. That just folders, and you just drill your way down through it all, right? And we've done that way so that you can just download one thing at a time if you want. Like if you want to find a video, you can just download that one video, and that's a better way of playing a video than playing it on YouTube, because you're going to download it, you'll have a store of it, and on top of that, you'll be able to play it over and over again without needing the internet. And then on top of that, you can share it if you want, and so forth. So it's the easiest way to download a file. You just click on it, click on the file we want to download, and it will do a download.
Is this
Go
the
ahead.
same format as when you downloaded hard drives for us?
Sorry?
Is this the same as when you downloaded it on a hard drive for us?
Yeah, it's exactly the same. It looks exactly the same, works exactly the same way, but it's on the internet instead. You can actually sync the entire thing using a process called rsync as well, from there to your own disk if you want to. And at the moment, that service is called sync.divinetruth.com. But you need to have some tech skills to do that, because it's using a program called rsync, and unless you know how to use that, then you're going to struggle.
Two things. One, there's a way to strip all the videos off of YouTube, and I've done that.
Yeah, but it's probably slower than downloading out from our site.
Maybe. And the other question I have for you is, for you both to do everything you want to do, how much would you need per month?
It's not about the money, it's about the people.
It's about
To do everything we want to do, we need to offload from Mary and I a number of things. So we need to offload all the tech from myself. We need to offload all of the admin from Mary, because she handles a lot of admin for God's Way and Divine Truth as well. And she handles all of our event bookings and everything else. So we need reliable people who are going to be able to handle those things to the standards
Yeah.
that the loving standards that we expect, which means they're going to have some development in love themselves. So let's say we offloaded all of that, right? And that would also then mean we'd offload me having to look after audio at a group. We'd have to, so eventually that's where we need to get. We need to get to a stage where we're offloaded everything. We can rock up at a venue, teach, and we're done.
And then we need very little cash, actually, to do what we love and to do what we want. The thing is that there's like exponential projects that we would like to do on earth to help people engage with God's truth in a practical manner. So it wouldn't be to sort of support our lifestyle, but you know, the more people in the right condition, and then the more funds, the more projects we would engage. So it's sort of there's not really one.
But it's no good getting the money without people, because there's no one to run. Like you got all the money, but there's no like people doing the regular things they need to do to get it all happening. Does that make sense?
So much we could do so many things just with people.
With people.
The three people right now, Corny and Phoebe and Eloisa,
Yep.
is there a vision of satelliting one of them out to do humility in action at a location when you have
Yeah.
enough people,
That
and
would-
then
Yes, they're
we
at
already
the
wanna
moment
do
trying
that.
to find
Okay,
people to
good.
replace them.
They need to, but they need to have people in Australia who can do
Right.
it. But it was an idea that I had already, that they could come on a trip like
With
this
us.
with
yeah,
us.
And they stay with you.
So
Yeah.
So
after
let's say
leave-
we teach here for a couple of weeks,
yeah,
and then they stay with you for 3 months.
that would love
That
that.
kind of
and
Wow.
you can do a project then. And if you had land
Yeah.
for a learning centre already, then you could all get to come together for a few weekends and actually start to build a venue or build a
Okay.
garden or build a
Okay.
you know
Yeah.
a regeneration project. And you also get the experience that many people have in Australia of what's it like to be at a humility and practice
Mhm.
day? What do these principles mean in action? And
Yeah.
Right.
that's very powerful.
Because then it's the day to day, you're being called on your stuff immediately.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
That makes a huge difference.
Yeah, a lot of people get sent home, mind you.
Oh,
Because they
I
don't.
read that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because they
Yeah.
don't.
Like a lot of people come, 5 minutes, go home.
Yeah.
With the invitation to come back the
Give an
next
invitation to
time.
come back next day.
Yeah.
And then they come the next day, 5 minutes.
Are you okay with some of us here on this continent to start, I've been looking, to start searching for damaged land from farm use that would be within your specs in the Appalachian Mountain Range area, Tennessee through Virginia?
Yeah, but again, it's going to be very dependent on there's a lot of things that need to be set up properly
Mm-hmm.
in order to even purchase that land. An example is we would need a US based company, a God's Way Limited in US. So
Okay.
a God's Way Inc. I suppose you would have it here, I think,
Yeah.
in the US. Set up as a non-profit with with members. It would have to allow for international members. It would initially only probably have international members until we can find people who we can trust to run it in the country. Then that company would need a constitution, which we've already written for Australian law, but not for the US law. So that would have to be done. And then, so there's a whole series of things that need
Yeah.
to be done before you can even buy the land. And
But I never thought I'd see you in person, so I'm optimistic.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, we're optimistic that it will all be done, but many of you do not understand the procedures that need to be followed in order for it to be done.
Mhm.
I've had the experience of running companies in Australia and also in the US before, and so I've got quite a lot of experience in these things, but it does require people being trained in those things. And then, of course, there needs to be an accounting system set up that is for the country that
Mhm.
you're in. So that requires a person who's going to run that accounting system it's going to be a full-time job probably, eventually.
Or like 12 months of the year.
12 months of the year, they're going to have to be on the ball
And they
accounting.
have to be honest and law-abiding and
Yeah.
all of those things.
And then those people also need to want to live by donations themselves,
Mhm.
because one of the things we've written into the God's Way Constitution at the moment, and it might change, but at the moment, nobody is paid by God's Way. So all the directors are not paid by God's Way. They get donations just like Mary and I do from all over the world to support themselves, but they don't actually get paid by the organisation to do the job. So every person working for God's Way is a volunteer.
Mhm.
Everyone, right from the directors down to... So you've got people working full time for God's Way, but they're volunteers. So how do they live? They live by other people being generous with them and donating to them to help them do that. That's how they live. And so at the moment, Eloisa, Phoebe and Corny are living very inexpensively, as you can imagine, because they receive very little personal donations at the moment, which in time, over time, will improve. And it
Her
takes...
blog on parenting is fantastic.
Yeah, and there's different things that each of them are doing to help that improve, so that they have more donations, so that they can then, continue their full-time work with God's Way. And when I say full-time, it's pretty much 24/7 full-time. It's not like 5 days a week. We have meetings all the times, day and night sometimes. That's how it works. Whatever we need to sort out is sorted out. So it's quite an involved thing. So for example, you could look around here to find land, but then who buys it?
Yeah.
Now, if one person who's got some money buys it, well, that's okay, but that one person now owns it. That's not the same as God's Way owning it, right? Now, that one person, let's say in 6 months' time, they get upset with Mary and I, which happens
Often.
very often, more often than not, actually. Now, whatever you've invested in that as a group of people is all lost because one person.
Right.
So we can't have that.
Yeah.
It has to be set up in an organisation so that when people get upset, it's too bad. Yeah. things can continue.
About your books, are you going to, I'm just thinking if you're going to give them away, you have no income on that, you're going to sell them, so you would have.
No, I want to give them away.
Yeah, they have to be free.
Yeah, so we need to raise funds from people who are willing to donate for the paper and whatever other publishing costs there might be, so that we can give them away. We want to give everything away.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is the trouble, is that everything costs something and you're trying to give it away.
And you're planning on doing them in Low German and High German?
We're hoping to have them translated, yes. Yeah. But obviously, at this stage, we're a bit dependent upon the condition of the people doing the translating to make sure they translate the right way.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of things that we're noticing in the translations where people are coming back to us and saying, oh, this is the word being used there, but is that what you mean? And I go, no, that's not what I meant at all. You know, so.
And German, we do have a number of German friends or people we've met who say that it's actually very hard to translate Divine Truth into German.
And a number of other languages too,
Because of the connotations of the words that we use in German, like humility, and it doesn't have the same
humility,
faith.
the basic words in German mean to denigrate yourself,
Yeah.
which is not humility. So, you know, it's difficult when it comes to translation. It's hard enough doing it all in English, and then coming to look at the translation issue, there's a lot of complexities there.
Well, I would have thought humility in Low German is Demütig. If you're Demütig.
Let's not get into it.
Yeah.
We're not good. Yeah.
The word is very different. Okay.
Yeah.
Is there a way we can donate to the others in God's Way, like to Courtney and Eloise?
Yeah, on godsway.net, any volunteer that is working full-time, there's a page that lists every volunteer who is working full-time, and every volunteer, we ask them to make their own donation page that they are personally responsible for, so it's not on Godsway.net, but there is a link on Godsway.net linking to the methods you can donate
And
to.
they are linked on our donation.
And they're also linked on
But it's not on
ours.
donate.
If you go to, on our page, if you go to donate.divinetruth.com, and there's a pull down that says others, other volunteers.
They're there. Yeah.
And they'll also be listed there. So any volunteer who is working full-time for free for God's Way is listed
Or
there.
Divine Truth.
Or for Divine Truth. But any volunteer who is not working full-time or not for free, we don't put there. Does that make sense?
Mary, is it in that donate.divinetruth.com, is that where we would donate for this particular event?
Yes. Thank you.
There's a link for that?
Yes.
There is. You can use either just general donations. There's different codes, so you can use either general donations or assistance group. We haven't set one up specifically
For this trip.
Yeah.
Nothing called living room.
No.
So just general expenses or
Yeah.
to Divine Truth or
But now having met you,
for assistance group.
I can finally donate directly to you. Am I reading that right on your website?
Yeah.
Or would you prefer it to be general?
Well, there's also, you can give personal gifts in Australia to Mary and myself. And but under the law in Australia, all of the stuff that goes to Divine Truth is income. So we pay income tax on it, and we pay what's called goods and services tax on it, and all that kind of stuff. So it's run like just a normal business. In God's Way, it's a little bit different because it's a non-profit. So, but
we still pay.
we still pay income tax, even though it's non-profit. The belief we have is that we should pay income tax because there's a whole heap of services that the government is providing that we want them to provide, and so we want to support them providing it. So we don't have the view that we should be tax-free, right, with anything. So, and that's the same wherever we set up all around the world. All of the organisations we set up will pay tax of some kind. That being said, in godsway.net, a lot of you can actually give gifts to godsway.net as long as they have what's called a statutory declaration made, and those gifts we don't have to include as income in godsway.net. So in other words, we don't have to pay tax on those gifts.
Would you prefer that as a donation?
Well, it depends on the size of the donation, because sometimes the paperwork is
Okay.
too much trouble
Okay,
to, you know, like, so if you're going to give a sizable donation, we've generally marked at anything above $1,000
okay.
Australian. If it comes with a stacked deck, then you know, obviously
It can be seen as a gift.
It can be
and
seen as a
no
gift.
tax on that, yeah.
with Mary and I, if you know us personally, you're allowed to give us gifts, but you have to know us personally. Other than that, everything goes to Divine Truth as expenses and
As income.
as income. Sorry. Now, Mary and I have also put money towards this trip from our own coffers, I suppose you can call them,
Yeah.
which we've taken 12 years to save up, actually. So while we've been doing all of these other things, Mary and I have been trying to save up to build us a house. Because our goal is to give our house to God's way. We've got the studio next to our house, and so what we want to do is we want to give the house and the studio to God's way, so God's way has an office. At the moment, they don't have an office. So, and we don't want them to go into town and have an office in town or rent an office. So we thought, well, the best thing to do is we give them our house. It's already partially set up as an office, and also allows for a few visitors to come and stay as well. And so what that means is that Mary and I won't have a house anymore. So what we're looking at, what we're doing for 12 years is we've been saving money to build a house. Now, we've spent a bit of that money for the trip, but for the most part, that's what we've been trying to do. Now, you can donate to Mary and I or give gifts to Mary and I directly, but how we treat it will depend a lot upon whether it has a stat debt with it or not.
Okay.
If it doesn't have a statutory declaration, by the way that means, with it, then we have to treat it as income anyway.
Okay.
And so
I had done history with fund accounting for a church, a United Methodist Church, and if you earmarked a gift for a specific thing, it would be used for that thing and still considered income. So if I intentionally wanted, because I had seen that you had gone into your house savings for this trip.
Yep.
So if my donations wanted to go directly to supporting you building a home, would I have to earmark that or just let it go into the general and?
yeah, honestly,
You have to.
Divine Truth, I spent, before I started all of this, I was a property developer and an engineer. I had around about $800,000 at my disposal. This was 20 years ago, I should say. Since then, I've spent all of that money, but I've given it to Divine Truth. So I've actually got a big loan that's been accruing to Divine Truth. Basically, Divine Truth runs at a loss every year, and I pay for that loss.
Okay.
And to the point now where some people have given us sort of like personal gifts, and I keep using those personal gifts to pay for the loss of Divine Truth. So really, the better thing is so that Divine Truth is no longer in a loss, would be first.
Go to Divine Truth.
Yeah, going to Divine Truth. Then Divine Truth can pay me back for what I've given it, and then because I've got that money back, I can build my house.
And when you say that, when I go to the website, it would still be to continue doing it general?
Just general
Okay,
expenses or
general.
assistance group or something like that. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then because I've got such a big loan with Divine Truth, we're not going to need that amount of money to build the house. So, you know, it's all going to be all done with our labour. So, you know, it's probably going to cost us $250,000 or something. So, you know, so if I can just re-loan back pay the loan back
Right.
to myself, then I can get the house built.
Yeah.
So don't worry about all that. Just whatever you can donate towards getting something done, we'll happily accept in any way you want to give it. And with regard to Divine Truth, we will be declaring it as income. But also Divine Truth has had such a large loss for such a long time. I think I've got accrued losses of $500,000 in Divine Truth as well. So at the end of the day, it's going to be some time before we have to pay for being in profit. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that was just a company I had I changed the name of the company I had way before and called it Divine Truth once I started. You know, as soon as I realised who I was actually, I did that. And but since then I've just been putting any money I have spare into it to keep it going. Because as you know, it just costs a lot of money to provide services for free that everybody's charging you for, you know, so yeah. So yeah, we're trying to, in terms of money, that's the situation really. It's easier just to put it to Divine Truth and then we'll sort out if we can pay back our loan a bit, then we've got enough personal funds to build a place on the property that we're gifting. Eventually our idea, Mary and I, is that we will gift our property to God's Way. So God's Way will eventually own our house and own the studio and own the water collection that we're just building at the moment, that Mary and I have paid for, and they'll own our house, Mary and my house eventually. So Mary and I don't really want to own anything. We just want a place where we can come back to Australia to live for however long we're there. Now, given the fact how we have to change our trips so they're less exhausting. So that's one thing we need to do. Now that might mean making it a bit longer, but also less spaces and
Less stops.
less stops and so forth. But we also need at the moment to be back in Australia at least for 6 months of the year, so that we can keep an eye on how God's Way is going in Australia, and give the guys the support they need, face-to-face support they need to continue that until such a time as they're very comfortable, which might be a few years yet. After that, we sort of expect that we'll be travelling more often, perhaps. And so, ideally, all we really need is a little house in each country we go to. That is actually a part of a venue that other people can use when we're not there. So, does that make sense? Sort of, we don't really need a house of our own. We just need a place like a B&B we can come and stay at. That is a part of the God's Way centre that other people can stay in when we're not there, because otherwise it's a waste of resources. And all Mary and I finish up doing is
Rocking in, rocking out.
rocking in and rocking out, sort of thing. Is the idea. We've always had this as an idea for a long time. So, and we just want to, until we die, focus on teaching Divine Truth and spending as much time with people as we can, and hopefully the other people will handle some of the nuts and bolts that we're currently handling to get things set up, so that we don't have to handle them, where we can focus on writing and sharing Divine Truth.
Is that how you do it in the spirit world, guys?
Yeah.
I have a feeling maybe.
Yeah, we have, in the Celestial Heavens, we have a team of people who help us. They do almost everything that they can do without needing our assistance. Of course, every one of them is at one with God, so they're in a very good space. We direct things on a sort of a major scale. We're sort of like, you could say, I suppose you could call us like the managing directors of the Celestial Heavens. Does that make sense? And then we have 7 soul pairs, 6 other soul pairs who assist us in different areas. And they are the 6 that return. But they are assisting us in major areas of interest. So some of those areas are, how to run cities, how to run locations in the spirit world in terms of in harmony with love. Some of those areas are to do with dealing with, new arrivals in the spirit world and other things. But there's a large variety of areas of interest. And then they direct other people who assist them in teams.
And you all 6 of you united as a soul, correct? Am I right?
No.
Oh, no.
No. Mary and I are just one soul,
there. So
Maybe I didn't ask the question. The 6 others that you said work with you,
Well, there's 12
the
people.
ones that have come
What-
back,
yes,
right?
Yes.
So all of them have united as, so is what I'm trying to
Yes.
say.
Yeah.
They've all gone through the soul union
That's what I'm
process.
trying to
when you
Yes,
first said it, it was
yeah.
like we're all one soul.
No, I didn't mean
Yeah,
that.
no,
No,
they've all
I
gone
meant
through the
you're
soul.
all- yeah.
Each soul is.
Yeah, so they're all in
That's
the
what I was
uni
trying to
state. Yeah. But even before we reach that state, this is how we
Operate.
did things, yeah.
Could you please repeat the question?
What question
Oh,
is
I
she-
asked him when he was describing their vision of where they want to go here on Earth. I said, "Is this how you do it in the celestial, in the spirit world?" And he said, "Yes."
Yeah.
Thank you.
So yeah, a lot of the things we want to set up on Earth are very similar to what we do in the spirit world. So for example, in the sixth sphere of the spirit world, there's universities that are just for divine truth. Now, they're not always well attended, except when usually one of us comes to teach there. But they're there, they're used to share divine truth in that sphere.
Can we go in there in the sleep? Well, I guess we'd have to be in the sixth sphere to go there in the sleep state.
Correct. Yeah. We have them in every sphere as well.
How about Summerland?
Yeah, there's some.
For kids or something?
Yeah, there's some in Summerland.
Yes.
Yeah, no internet, no.
But definitely classes.
Yeah, definitely classes, lots of classes, millions. Because the biggest problem in the spirit world is how many children are dying every year. Like, there's more children dying every year than there is any other people dying every year. Because you've got all the abortions and all the miscarriages. So they add up usually between anywhere from 150 to 250 million children every year. And then you have around 50 million children dying every year from malnutrition and other problems. So yeah, you're talking huge amounts of children arriving in the spirit world every single year, all of whom need education. So it's a major operation looking after the children arriving in the spirit world. Major operation. It's the biggest single operation in the spirit world. Yeah. The biggest single operation. It's a huge task, and there's not enough people doing it. Like a lot of our celestial friends look after 50 children or more each while they're doing whatever else they do. So
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
the problem no one wants to talk about much on
yeah,
this.
I know. Is how when you look at abortions and miscarriages and why miscarriages happen, but also abortions and why they happen, and then you look at the subsequent damage to the souls of those children and how much assistance they need, and then you look at also why is it that 50 million children are starving to death every year and dying from disease related and usually malnutrition. Why all of that's happening? It's the worst problem on earth. Like it exceeds any other problem you've ever faced. And yet, you think during COVID, how much did you hear about it? You heard about all the people who were dying from COVID, which was what, about 1 million at its worst, about 1 million a year. Compare that to 200 million a year children dying every year, and it's like COVID's like a drop in the ocean compared to what's happening every year with children. Nobody says a thing about it on earth.
Why do you think that is?
Well, because firstly, fundamentally, we don't care for our children as much as we think we do. Firstly. Secondly, there's this desire to ignore miscarriage and abortion, the causes of miscarriage and abortion, to a large degree. And each of them have their individual issues, their individual sins that cause them. And most people don't want to see it as a sin. Like, you think of this movement there is now of a woman's right to choose, as they call it, which is really, from God's perspective, saying a woman's right to sin by murder. That's how God sees it. And there's so many problems with it, and because most people don't even understand when the soul incarnates.
Right.
They don't understand the truth about when the soul connects to the bodies and what time frame that happens in, and then what effect it happens to reject that child and They don't understand things like IVF and what's really going on. You know, and they don't understand miscarriage and what's going on there either. And the lack of education is intense when it comes to the process of incarnation. And as a result of that, there's like a terrible amount of destruction of people's lives going on that the spirit world has to bear the consequence of, in terms of looking after these millions and millions of people arriving in such an undeveloped state in the spirit world. And so it is the single biggest thing going on in the spirit world, is looking after children. Bigger than any other thing happening in the spirit world. You can understand why, because it's such a large number arriving in a completely uneducated state. They don't even know how to use their will or anything. They haven't learnt that yet. So there's just it's a huge task, and many of our spirit friends are involved in, you know, managing that task, looking after that task, arranging for people to look after those children, and so forth.
That alone should make us want to deal with our sin.
Yeah.
That, what you just said,
Yeah.
that alone.
Yeah. And it's sad because a lot of us don't see, all we see from our choices is our personal right to make the choice. But frequently we don't see the net result of all of those choices on people in their lives, you know. And particularly with the unborn, because they don't have a voice for themselves. And there's very few real advocates of them on earth, even amongst people who don't believe in abortion, for example. Many of them have huge amount of miscarriages, not understanding why, and it has a very similar effect on the child as an abortion, actually. And most don't understand why. And don't even want to understand why.
I don't understand miscarriages.
No, most people on earth don't. There's a whole series of emotional things that happens to cause a miscarriage to occur, and most people don't want to look at any of the sins involved that cause a miscarriage to occur. Because they want to see it as it's not a sin. My emotions towards children are not a sin, you know. And so there's a lot of bad emotions coming towards children that cause them to miscarriage, and most people don't want to look at what those emotions are.
Actually, Phoebe in Australia has a project about miscarriage.
Yeah.
She has her own YouTube channel, and she also has a kind of a research project that if anyone who's had a miscarriage who wants to be involved in.
She's trying to research. What she's trying to do is help people understand, gather data to help people understand the link between the mother and father's emotions and why a miscarriage occurred. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. And she's trying to do that. She's been trying to do that for many years. She gets attacked the entire time because the average person doesn't want to think it's anything to do with the sin.
Well, I mean, even our physical illnesses, people don't want to think it has anything to do with their emotions.
Yeah, that's right.
They really don't. I have a sister-in-law who has cancer. I said, would you like to know how to get rid of it? And you know what she said to me? No, because she knows I believe that emotions, that makes her really angry. Really?
Yeah, well, it makes them feel like you're saying to them that you're to blame for your own problem.
That you're
and substantially.
Well, we are kind of responsible for what's been happening
Correct.
in our
Substantially
bodies.
we are. And this is what the average person doesn't want to hear. Then this is one of the ways we fight our sin, right? You know. Yeah, we'll talk about that.
We should start.
Let's finish.
I feel like we're avoiding.
Can we finish? So can you just answer any question about this, and then we'll move on to the topic sin.
I was curious how big of a problem IVF is.
Well, that's an issue with sin, so we'll raise that in a minute. Yeah. Anything else? Anything about these things in terms of? So can you see that unless we find the people and we set up the proper structures, it's very, very hard then to look at the next step of let's find a place. Do you see?
Yeah.
And so this is why it's so important. So a lot of people they want to act like to support truth on earth, but sometimes we want to act because we end up feeling like at least I'm doing something, right? But the trouble is if you do that without facing your sin, in the end, most of the actions you take are going to be unloving one way or the other, and therefore not going to be effective. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's very important to see with all of this that the reason why things are going slowly or perceived to be going slowly, and I know for many of you who have been listening to Divine Truth for a few years have felt that, is not because of the lack of effort on Mary and my part, or the lack of effort on the part of some sincere other people. It's to do with the fact that there's not enough people yet becoming sincere about their sin. And unless we can get more people to be more sincere about their sin, then you really can't set up things that you want to set up for the future without those people. Because at the end of the day, we want lots of people to be involved. But to be involved, they've got to be in the right condition. Makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's a proper foundation.
Yeah.
For me, I found it was really important to go to Australia
Yep.
to get out of my normal environment
Yep.
because I couldn't see my sin
In
because
that
I was
environment.
surrounded by it.
Yeah.
And then when I was in Australia, it was much clearer and made clearer to me by you guys and other people.
Yeah.
So that helped me to become more aware of what I needed to deal with.
Yeah. The problem with that though is that it requires a certain amount of funds to do that.
Yeah.
And not everybody has those funds.
Yeah.
So this is why at some point we need to
Have those places.
have
in
those
other
places
countries.
in other places of the
Yeah.
world where people can come and it's a lot easier to come.
Yeah.
So I agree, having a place where you can go and then somebody's telling you every day, like, there you go again, and there you do the same thing again, is very helpful. But to get that to happen, we need the people who are in good enough condition to observe and see what's going on in other people. So they need to be in pretty good condition, you know, like second or third sphere condition at least, before they can start to be of any real assistance. And then you've also then got to go, okay, even though those people exist, now how can we put them in different places around the world so that they're of benefit to more people and everybody doesn't have to go to one location and receive that benefit.
Yeah.
So we do see in the midterm, you know, that the more people get into that condition where they are really honest about their sin and can really and are really developing their relationship with God, those people then can be a bit like, they can sort of follow us around in a way. Like we can go to a place, do some teaching, and then say, see you later everybody, and then instead of being, oh, see you later and there's nothing now, you got a little team of people would be ideal, who can run little events here and there, do some practical things in a location, do some very loving things for the environment and helping, you know, the location or the people in the location, but they're using that as a teaching tool to teach the principles that we've just left everybody with.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that is a necessary part. We have that in the spirit world. You know, Mary and I don't have to teach everybody.
Yeah.
We teach groups of people, usually large groups, sometimes individuals, but for the most part we've got other people who we know well, who are reliable and who love God as much as, you know, we do, and they spend, you know, they do the personal follow-ups, if you like, with people, helping the individuals. Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about that channeling with Sapphire out in Australia,
Yep.
the second sphere group of spirits, and how enthusiastic they were and how much they wanted to help.
Yeah.
And I thought when people get into that condition here on Earth, just a little team of second and third sphere spirits who are
Yeah.
that enthusiastic and that passionate about
Yeah.
third sphere people,
Yeah.
would be amazing.
You get to the stage where you go, well, there's nothing more important in life, to be honest.
Yeah.
Particularly life on Earth, because life on Earth, a lot of the life on Earth is unhappy because of the lack of love and understanding about love that occurs on Earth. And you can see that if there was an improvement in understanding love properly, understanding how to love God's way, then that would have a significant change, you know, on Earth as well. And then it has a big follow-on effect in the spirit world when they arrive there too, because they don't ever have to go through hell. They don't ever have to go through the first sphere, or often the second sphere, if you can teach people to the point of where they love the truth and love to see their sin and they're not resistive. You know, by the stage they get to there, they're usually top of the second sphere, and maybe even entering the third. Once you get to that stage, it's sort of like, wow, you can get some things done, and everybody's in a positive state about getting it done. But everyone's also humble, looking at themselves, have faith as well, because they've had some established faith through their experience. So yeah, once you get to that point, then things can really progress, and we're hopeful for that point to be arrived at on Earth. Hopefully within the next 10, 15 years for groups of people.
Wow.
That's what we're hoping. And that's one reason why we've gotten pretty confronting about sin on this trip, and we're going to get more confronting as we go. Because, you know, without that, there's not going to be any growth. There's not going to be any change. And that's what we need. Okay.
Enough of us being much more sincere with our sins.
Yep.
And this is more like an economy function question. Sorry, it's a logic one.
Can you speak up?
I'm
You
sorry.
need to speak up.
Since time here on Earth, like since the time you began speaking, there's been hundreds, maybe thousands of years that passed in the spirit world for some of the celestial spheres. I was just wondering if
When you
enough
say
of us here
hundreds
on,
of thousands of years have passed, I
I don't know, like you said, there's a.
Well, no, it's just that you fit more
you
into
feel.
time.
Oh, okay, I guess I misunderstood.
So time, yeah. So firstly, don't think that if there's 1,000 years here, it's 10,000 years there. It's not like that.
Okay.
It's you can get done the equivalent of 10,000 years of work in the 1,000 years.
I see.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is, like, if enough of us came together and did this, the work, and became more sincere with our sins, and had this deep desire, part of this, is it possible that celestial angels could use their free will to materialize a body and help us out one day?
We think so, yes.
Yeah. Walk with us? I don't know.
Yeah, we think
Well,
so.
you're here, so
Yeah. We expect so. It won't happen until one of the 14 probably become at one with our soul. We're not in the process of becoming at one with God, just as you are. We're in a different process, and those things won't happen until one of us at least is in that state. But after that state is reached, then yes, I think it's very possible that we'll be able to invite our spirit friends to come and have chats with you, and eventually get to the stage where they can just come freely and have chats with many of you. Yeah.
Sounds delightful.
But that is going to obviously take a number of changes need to occur on Earth before that can occur. From a spiritual perspective, there are laws involved which prevent spirits from sharing with you things that are against your will to accept. And so sin is your major way that things are against your will. Like when you're in a state of sin, your will is exercised against God's principles and laws. And so a person who has a will to sin is not going to be able to have a celestial spirit appear and talk to them. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm imagining that us being sincere with our sin and releasing that is the best way that we can help you get into the condition where that could occur.
Yes, but remember that the being sincere with the sin is for the ultimate goal, so that you can receive more love.
Right. Yeah.
So don't forget that
Yes.
the ultimate goal isn't just to be sincere with your sin. It's so the whole purpose of being sincere with your sin is so that your relationship with God can get stronger.
Yes, and I feel like when God's love flows, I'm more open to seeing the sin, the next sin.
That's right.
To deal with.
And you'll get to the stage, and usually it happens near the top of the second or something, you get to the stage where you've received enough of God's love to no longer be resistive to humility as much as we are when we're in sin, right? And once you get to that stage, then progress is inevitable after that. Like you will progress like continuously after that. It's the time when you're in the fight with your sin, where you want to justify your sin.
Yeah.
That's where your progress is the slowest, but it's also where it's the hardest, because there's this fundamental internal battle going on inside of you. One part of you is like good angel on one side, almost, saying, do this, this is good. And the other part of you, the sin, is going,
It'll never work.
Yeah, so you know the whole concept of the devil. Well, it is true to say the sin is the devil within you. Because it is the thing fighting for itself to continue to exist. So it's like the devil within you. So it's not accurate to say there is a devil. There is no devil. There's no Satan. There's no king of the dark spirits or anything like that. But it's like, metaphorically, the sin that's inside of you is like the devil. It's like a voice in your head going, and in your feelings going, do this, it's going to be good for you, even though it's not good for you. And this is what it's doing. And if you can address that, your relationship with God will improve markedly. You'll also receive more love, and you'll receive it more easily. That means that you'll progress faster, right? The problem is that your sin doesn't want you to progress fast. Your sin wants you to go as slow as you possibly can and get away with it. That's what your sin wants. It wants you to go as slow as you possibly can, and it wants you to get away with doing that. Both, Yeah. So yes, the biggest way to really assist the growth of divine truth on earth is to confront the sin, is to work through the sin. It's going to be tricky. There's an internal battle. It's going to be difficult. You're going to find it a struggle. And then on top of that, there are some external influences, which we'll talk about more tomorrow, that spirit influences which are causing you to not want to do it too.
Well, yeah.
And we'll talk more about the spirit influences on your sin tomorrow, trying to get you to not see your sins or do anything about them. And particular spirits are fine with you seeing your sins. They're not fine with you doing anything about them.
So awareness is easy.
So that they're okay with you going, oh yeah, I know I sin that way and I know I sin this way. They're okay with that. That what they're not okay with is that you actually change that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I feel like tons of condemnation when I do address something, just the pet thing.
Yeah.
Dealing with that, just massive amounts of condemnation.
Yeah, and some small, like tiny issues like the pet thing, and there's massive amounts of condemnation, and not just from spirits, but also from people around there as well.
This was the people
massive
around.
amounts, and then they get spirit influence, of course.
And
by
then the
doing it.
spirits, yeah.
That's right.
That's how
And so it's sometimes full on. You think, wow, that was just a little thing. How am I going to handle the big thing? When that was so little, and look at how enraged everybody around me was about it. And this is very common, and this is and it's very good to understand what's going on around you that causes you to keep your inertia, to have inertia where you don't actually do anything. And a lot of you don't realise, but a lot of it is due to pressures to stay the same. Right? And this is something that is a very common problem on earth. There's a lot of pressures, spirit pressure and people on earth pressure, for you to stay the same person as you currently are, with the same injuries, with the same errors. Because the only way a lot of institutions on this planet can actually function is by you keeping your errors. Right? You look at your politics state in the US. It can only function by you keeping errors.
Same with the financial.
Same with financial, same with medical, same with drug industry, same with, religion. It can only function the way it's functioning by keeping errors. Does that make sense? And so when you start seeing the power of sin, right, which is functionally what it is while you stay in sin, it's really the power of your free will exercised to sin, right? So when you start seeing the power of a free will exercised to sin, all we need to do is look at the earth and that's the results. Yep. So the result isn't because we're going to war here, and the result isn't because we're doing that there. The result stems from this individual desire to sin.
And that's a word I have found when people who claim to be really spiritual, they hate it when I talk about sin. And
Of course,
redemption.
yeah.
I mean, they just project rage, and they're claiming they're really spiritual.
Yeah, that's right.
It's really.
There are some religions
something.
that are okay with the word, like the Christian faith perhaps is more
Yeah,
okay with
yeah,
it.
yeah.
But of course their definition of sin is pretty skewed.
Yeah.
They sort of feel that God being an angry God is going to come and punish the wicked is not a sin, but actually even feeling that is a sin.
Exactly.
So they don't feel that's a sin when it actually is. But then, but they do have a concept there is such a thing as sin. But there's other, New Age type teachings and other things like that. The concept of sin has been completely rejected. And the same goes with the atheist religion and the agnostic religion. And I call them all religions because they do have a very set of faiths. Even when you've got a lack of faith, that's a set of faith.
Very organized.
Very organised, yeah. Structured set of faiths, and the world is really heading now towards this concept and idea. There is no such thing as sin, and all of our problems are because we were designed imperfectly, and the only repair of it is technology.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and so this is a very dangerous world. This has happened a number of times historically, by the way, and each time the Earth got to a point of getting almost like cataclysmic upheavals, not just socially but also physically, where whole continents disappeared as a result of the actions taken by science. People engaged in their science, thinking that science was the solution to all of humankind's problems, and that cycle's happened already 3 times on this Earth. So it's sort of like these problems that we're coming up with now, this whole concept that technology, medical technology or, scientific technology, electronic technology and all these other technologies, they're all the solution to humankind's problems and to humankind's unhappiness. And these are very, very wayward things that occur from God's perspective, and they usually lead humanity down a road where the earth itself starts complaining. Which it's already doing now, right? Where the earth itself starts complaining, it goes through a complaint period, and then it goes through a readjustment period. And hopefully we listen to the complaints before the readjustment, because if we get to the point where we don't listen to complaints and we just act on technology over and over again, it's going to get to the stage where there's going to be some cataclysmic events, and that's going to be quite devastating to large numbers of people. Because we haven't listened to the complaints. Yeah. But that's all the result of our sin. A whole lot of that. And dealing with sin is a practical thing. It's a practical solution. A lot of people don't see it as a practical solution. They sort of see it as it's a very philosophical one, or it's a sort of something internal, spiritual thing that you don't have to visit upon anybody else type of feeling that most people have. And that's not true. Dealing with your sin is a very practical solution to human problems. Yeah. We only have problems because we're sinning. And God didn't design us to sin. This whole concept that humans were designed imperfectly, this whole idea, but I'm just human. And so, I should get away with this behaviour or that behaviour. From God's perspective, no, you're not just human, you're human, the pinnacle of His creation, designed without sin. And you can also get back to a condition of being without sin. Right? But it is your responsibility to do that. God's not going to do that for you. He'll be if you invite him to help, he will help under certain conditions. And the condition is awakening to sin to the point where you repent. That's the condition where he'll help, but aside from that, he won't even help. The laws will help. He's designed a whole system where the laws help, but he won't help you personally unless you go through the process of awareness to awakening and then repentance. He's not going to help. Right? So God expects you to do the awareness, you to go through to the awakening, you to repent, then he helps. Right? Now, of course, he's got a whole heap of things in place to assist you to get to the point where you're awakened. You know, there's a whole heap of laws that are just being created for that purpose, actually, for the soul to awaken. And God's created these laws and just for this purpose, but he's not going to do it for you. You know, at some point he's going to say, I gave you free will, right? So it's up to you what you do. What is the time? Okay. Perhaps now is the time to have a good break, like a lunch break, and then we'll get back onto the subject, Kate, of dealing with the important thing.